Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company. That's right, here on the 440 Sports Network. We are presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. We are live at the beach, which I am excited about. I said, hey, I was going to do the show from the beach. I said I'd do it Thursday and Friday. I'm going to be honest with you people. I love you people. I may not be doing tomorrow's show just because, well, it's really nice at the beach. And yes, I have shaved if you're watching the stream. I do that when I go on vacation. I shave because, you know, the beards get nasty and dirty. And so they got to go, you know, when I'm on vacation. And then by Monday, the beard will be back enough. And I think people will be okay with that. I do want to say that we got some real coaching news to get into. And I was a little surprised with some of the coaching news that we saw. We'll get to that in a second. First, I want to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. And I also want to tell you about the fact that we're on the Stillman & Company YouTube page. And like and subscribe, people. That's what we need. We need you all to like. We need you all to subscribe. That is kind of the hope around here, is that we keep the subscriptions coming, people, for whatever that's worth. Okay, did I just lose this? What happened here? There we go. We keep keep the likes coming, we keep the comments coming, but of course we keep the subscriptions coming as well. Subscribe. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. My guys take great care of my home. My humidifier came in yesterday. When I get home, Hiller will be there to install it. And that's why I trust them, because I know they're going to be there. I know they're going to be there when they say they're there. I know they're going to take great care of my home, and they can do the same for you. They've been in business since 1990. They are family owned and operated. 100% satisfaction. Of happy you'll be, or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, they will make it right. Learn more at happyhiller.com with professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians that come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. Care is their core value, which means that they believe that when they care about others, everybody wins. They'll take care of the customer on every job, every time. Again, I know this because I use Hiller at my home. That's Hiller, proud supporters of the Nashville Predators who play tonight, the Tennessee Volunteers, and the Vanderbilt Commodores. And by the way, how about Vandy basketball? With that big win last night against Alabama, I'm sure we'll touch on that at some point. But I want to start with what I consider to be the news of the day, the news du jour, which a lot of Titan fans are very excited about. So the Tennessee Titans, according to Adam Schefter, have requested permission, or are planning to request permission, with the following coaches who are coaching this weekend. Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, and Steelers offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. Now, when that came out from old Adam Schefter, I think Titans Twitter rejoiced. They said, yes. They said, yes, here we go. Yes. Yes. Saleh and Mike McDaniel got fired. He can be the OC, which Titan fans had been dreaming about, just dreaming about McDaniel and Saleh as the head coach and McDaniel as the offensive coordinator. What could possibly go wrong, Titan fans said. And I saw that tweet from Adam Schefter and that report from Adam Schefter, and I thought, Arthur Smith in the game. Now, it's funny. I actually talked to somebody who knows the Titans very well, and I said, what am I missing here? Why have they not reached out to interview Arthur Smith? Like, we know that they were going to reach out to interview Matt Nagy, regardless of whether or not they're going to hire Matt Nagy, and they're still probably going to hire Matt Nagy. But I said, why have they not reached out to talk to Arthur? Why have we not heard anything about Arthur? Like, is it as simple as Mike Borgonzi's going to hire his buddy and he and Arthur don't know each other, and so he's not in the boys club and they're not going to hire Arthur because of that? Or was there bad blood in the end between Amy and Arthur, or Kenneth and Arthur, or the ownership and Arthur? Or was there some sort of a, hey, you know, I know Vrabel had him as the offensive coordinator and they were the best offense the Titans ever had, but deep down inside, Arthur's kind of a bozo, and they know it. So instead of somebody they like, but they think he would be a terrible coach, they're just not even going to interview him or whatever. And I asked that person today, again, who knows the Titans very, very well. And I said, I go, why has Arthur not gotten an interview for the job? Like, what am I missing here? And that person said to me, I think they will. That person said they're probably going to interview Arthur. They said they're still playing, the Steelers are still playing, so you'll probably see some more interviews that happen and more names that come out and more stuff like that, down the road on that stuff. But that person who knows the Titans very well told me, no, I would expect that there will be an Arthur Smith interview. And I actually was going to not lead with that today, but I was going to talk about that today. And I was going to say, I heard from somebody who knows the Titans very, very well that they think Arthur's still in play, even though we have heard nothing about Arthur Smith. I want to talk about Arthur Smith for a second. I understand that when it comes to these coaches, I don't know these guys. I don't know Robert Saleh. I don't know Matt Nagy. I don't know Cliff Kingsbury. I know their resumes. And I know what I've seen of them on TV. But that doesn't mean that you know them. That doesn't mean that you can hold somebody accountable. And certainly with these coordinators, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I don't, etc. But I do know Arthur Smith. And I know Arthur Smith's a smart guy, and I know Arthur Smith's a good coach. And I've always looked at Arthur, not as the safe option, but I've looked at Arthur as the option that makes the most sense. The thing about the NFL is there are 32 jobs, and not any one job is like any of the other. Mike McCarthy, one thing that I really respect about Mike McCarthy is that Mike McCarthy was successful in two of the most unique situations in the NFL. Dallas, where Jerry Jones is the general manager and you have to deal with the Jerry Circus every week. And then Green Bay, where there is no owner. And so you have to deal with that, which again, it's unique. It's much better than dealing with a crazy ass owner, but it's unique. The Titans are very unique. Let's just call it how it is. They're run by a family. Amy owns the team and she's the controlling owner, but Kenneth Barkley is there and Kenneth Adams is there and Barclay Cunningham Adams is there, and Amy kind of hands it off to Burke Nihill and she goes off to Texas and the son-in-law's there, and it's just the Titans. It's a fucked up mess. We all know that. And J-Rob and Vrabel put it together as long as they could and they held it together, but it's a mess. Arthur Smith is the one guy who knows what he'd be getting himself into. And Arthur Smith is the one guy who not only does Amy Adams Strunk know, but he knows Amy Adams Strunk. I think these coaches will take whatever job is offered to them because it's one of 32. Years ago, when Floyd was still doing the show with me, we talked about Mike Vrabel, and I say, Mike Vrabel said when he took the job that he was going to do this, he was going to turn Mariota into a franchise quarterback. And Floyd said, of course he said that, because he would have said anything, because it's one of 32 and it pays millions. So of course he said that. And that's going to be the same with this. Every single one of these jobs, everybody's going to sit down. They're all going to love Cam Ward. They're all going to put on their best face. They're all going to be willing to deal with the shenanigans of the Titans. And then it's going to be like Brian Callahan, who got fired and then was telling people, or I don't know if he told him directly, but I told you that the person at ESPN told me that he didn't understand the politics of the job when he got it with the Titans. Because the Titans, it's a very unique situation. Again, they changed the structure every year. This time last year, Chad Brinker was in charge. The time the year before that, Rand Carthon was in charge. The time the year before that, nobody was in charge. So it's always getting changed. It's always, everybody's got their hands in there. And there's got to be somebody who understands what they're getting into, understands the politics of it, and understands that, you know what? This is a little different now. But you can manage it. And I think Arthur's kind of that guy. Again, I don't know what exactly happened with Arthur and the Falcons. I know this. The Falcons fucking stink. And they fucking stunk before Arthur, and they fucking stink after Arthur. And Arthur won 7 games with Marcus Mariota as his quarterback one year and Desmond Ridder as his quarterback the next year. Lord have mercy. I pray and hope that Cam Ward ends up better than those two. And if he does, then Arthur should win some more games. I think Terry Fontenot, the general manager in Atlanta, is a complete moron. And I feel the same way about the owner, Arthur Blank. So, when it comes to Arthur in Atlanta, I'm not saying I completely dismiss it. I want to know more about it. But I think that's an Atlanta problem. The same way with Robert Saleh and the people that love Robert Saleh. You probably look at Robert Saleh with the Jets and you think that that was a Jets problem more than it was a Robert Saleh problem. And you might be right. I have no idea. I know Arthur's not stupid. I know that. And I know Arthur Smith is a good coach. And what often happens is with these jobs, these teams look at the coach who's the hot young candidate, who's got a good offense, but sometimes these guys say, you know what? We want to go back to the old days. Philadelphia, post Chip Kelly, wanted to go back to the Andy Reid days. They brought in Doug Peterson. I saw Kuharsky had a story. Kuharsky can't get off Vrabel's nuts, but I saw Kuharsky had a story with Vrabel as the cover. It's like, the coach they need to hire is the coach they just fired. Well, the closest thing you can get to the Vrabel days, in my opinion, would be Arthur. So when it comes to Arthur, I am very much on board. I talked to a former NFL coach today who also knows the Titans very well and who knows Arthur very well. And I asked that head coach, I said, look, I know Arthur and I like Arthur, but, what do I know? I said, what do you think about Arthur as a potential coach? And he said, I think Arthur would be great. He said, I think Arthur would be great. And so I said to this coach, I said, so Arthur would have again, he knows Arthur very well. He knows the Titans very well and has been a head coach in the NFL. And I said to me, so does Arthur have your just full endorsement? He said, yes, and kind of put his foot down. And so I'm a big believer in Arthur Smith. And I'm a big believer that Arthur Smith, even when he got fired in Atlanta, I thought to myself, Arthur is a good coach. I know Arthur is a good coach. I watched Arthur coach here. I know Arthur can coach offense because I saw Arthur coach offense. What we were told Brian Callahan was going to be, this offensive guru just slinging the ball up and down the field. That is what the Titans were under Arthur Smith. I remember that 2020 season when it came to Arthur Smith, and I remember watching every game, and there would just be moments where I'd say, wow, just look at how schemed open that guy is running down the field. And I'm not saying that it wasn't because Derrick Henry was a great player. Derrick Henry was a great player. I'm not saying Ryan Tannehill didn't do his part. Ryan Tannehill absolutely did his part. And we all know A.J. Brown is a superstar. But at the same time, Ryan Tannehill was never as good before Arthur Smith or after Arthur Smith. That means something to me, especially when you're trying to make Cam Ward the guy. And so I am a huge, huge, huge supporter of Arthur Smith's. I saw that news today, and I knew predictably you people were going to all be like, yes, Saleh. And old buddy got fired, Mike McDaniel. So you're going to say the dream, Saleh and McDaniel. Yes, yes, yes. And I saw the same tweet from Shefty, and I had the same reaction of yes. But my reaction was to Arthur Smith, who, again, made Corey Davis, or I shouldn't say made. Ryan Tannehill was the best he ever was in his career with Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith were the best they ever were in their careers with Arthur Smith. Khalif Raymond became an NFL player under Arthur Smith. The offensive line struggled at the beginning of 2019 under Arthur Smith, but damn, they were good at the end. Remember in 2020, Taylor Lewan tore his ACL. They had David fucking Quesenberry at left tackle and had the number 2 offense in the NFL. That's with a backup left tackle, Dennis Kelly, who was essentially a backup at right tackle during the COVID season. Arthur Smith was that dude as the offensive coordinator of the Titans. And I know that what happens when a head coach doesn't have immediate success somewhere else, people just say, I think that guy should be a coordinator. That guy shouldn't be a coach. Well, Pete Carroll was a head coach, got fired, went to be a coordinator. He ended up being a coach. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Bill Belichick was a head coach. He had a little bit of success in Cleveland, but not a lot. Bill Belichick got fired, and he's one of the greatest coaches who ever lived. Let's see. I think Arthur Smith, Terry Fontenot, the general manager, I think is a total moron. And I also think that Arthur Blank, the owner in Atlanta, is also a total moron. So I am not going to just look at Arthur, say 7-10, 7-10, 7-10. He sucks. I mean, I think 7-10 with Matt Ryan 1 year, and they're trying to rebuild, and then they piss off Matt Ryan, and now in comes Mariota, and then they bench him for Ritter, and then the next year it's Ritter with the old buddy Taylor Heineke behind him. I don't think that is the line of demarcation that you're a terrible coach. I mean, for fuck's sake, Mike Vrabel was 6-11 when his team sucked, and that was with Ryan Tannehill and Will Levis at quarterback. And I do wonder, when I think about Arthur, I do wonder what Will Levis would look like. Not that I care about Will Levis because the future is Cam Ward. It's not Levis. But I do wonder what Will Levis would have looked like under Arthur Smith. And I think it would be better than Will Levis looked like under Tim Kelly and Brian Callahan. So that's the first thing on the Arthur front. The second thing, a lot of you guys have been daydreaming about coaching staffs and about, oh my God, could you imagine if we could hire I shouldn't say Matt Nagy because nobody's really dreaming of Matt Nagy. Saleh and McDaniel is one of the daydream things. Yesterday, I was stunned by the amount of people that were just clamoring for Chris Shula to be the next head coach of the Titans. And I saw people being like, oh my God, could you imagine if Chris Shula comes in as the head coach and then Raheem Morris comes in as the defensive coordinator and then whoever the fuck this El Hassi is or whatever, the quarterback's coach or receivers coach or whatever he's for the Rams, if this guy is oh my God, that would be awesome. And I'm like, what do you know about Chris Shula? Again, some of these guys, do you guys know some of these guys from a jar of Vicks? Or again, Fowler puts out there, the Titans have had legitimate conversations about, who was it? Shula and Mentor? And Titans fans were like, yes, Chris Shula, yes, yes, yes. And I was just following that on Twitter, and I was like, what makes Chris Shula so good? I don't understand. What am I missing here? But not to say that he's a bad coach. I just don't know him. But so as you guys have been daydreaming about these potential coaching staffs, and look, it is what it is. I saw somebody there talking about how great would it be if the Giants land John Harbaugh as the head coach, Kevin Stefanski is the offensive coordinator, and I forget who is defensive coordinator. And I'm like, I mean, really, Kevin Stefanski's going to go be a head coach, and John Harbaugh is going to go be a head coach. And this idea that they're going to get this all-star coaching staff, I think is just a little absurd. But then that takes me to Arthur. Now, Arthur's first staff in Atlanta was kind of a hodgepodge of coaches. There were some guys that had some Titans ties in the past. For instance, Dave Ragone was on the coaching staff here, I believe, under Munchak, and he was the OC under Arthur in Atlanta. And Dean Pease was brought in as the defensive coordinator. But Arthur did not have a big circle of people to pull from to put on his coaching staff in Atlanta. And so some of that is what all first-time coaches go through, which is trying to fill out a staff. And I know the guys I worked with, but I haven't worked in a ton of places, so it's harder for me to fill out a staff. Arthur has now had the experience of working in Pittsburgh. Arthur's had the experience of working in Atlanta. But I also think Arthur could wow Amy in the interview with his potential coaching staff. Did you guys see the story that Paul Kuharsky put out there today? And I didn't read it. I just saw the headline. I don't need to read it to know what's in it. According to Kuharsky, Mike Munchak would be open to returning to the Titans as the offensive line coach if the circumstances are right. Now, what's that mean? If the circumstances are right, it means A, that Mike Munchak likes the head coach, is willing to work for him, and B, that the Titans are going to pay him a real salary. That's what Munchak is looking for. But Munchak is telling Paul, I'm willing to get back in the game as the offensive line coach if the situation, if they pay me and if I can work with the head coach. That's what it says. And I know we all got burned over Bill Callahan, but we also know Mike Munchak is a damn good offensive line coach. We watched Mike Munchak coach offensive linemen. Floyd Reese was pulling these guys in the 4th and 5th rounds, and they were starting for 8 years and making Pro Bowls. Guys like John Runyon, who became an All-Pro at right tackle. Benji Olsen, who was a starter for 10 years at right guard. Jacob Bell, Eugene Amano, Michael Roos, David Stewart. I mean, you remember those guys. And Mike Munchak was a good O-line coach in Pittsburgh, and he was a good O-line coach in Denver. The problem with Mike Munchak is that Bud Adams loved him so much he made him head coach when he probably shouldn't have. Well, you know who hired Arthur Smith to the Titans? Mike Munchak. So Mike Munchak was the head coach of the Titans when Arthur Smith was hired as a quality control coach in 2011. And Arthur, and I don't know if it's because of who his daddy is, and I feel almost shameful saying that because it's like a knock on Arthur, where I think it's such a badge of honor that Arthur has gone on to have the career that he's had, given the fact that he could kick his feet up and not give a shit about anybody else. But I don't know if the Titans kept him around through coaching staff after coaching staff because of who his daddy was, or I don't know if they kept him through coaching staff after coaching staff because everybody in the building was like, Arthur Smith is the man. Whether that was Wisenhunt who kept him around, and Mike Mularkey who promoted him to tight ends coach when he got the head coaching job and kept him on the coaching staff when he got the full-time head coaching job, and Mike Vrabel who came in and kept him, and then Mike Vrabel who promoted him because Matt LaFleur wanted to take him to Green Bay. But again, the guy that brought Arthur to the Titans was Mike Munchak. So when Mike Munchak tells PK, I'd like to come back to the Titans under the right situation, that means a head coach who he's willing to work for, which I would assume would be Arthur, and they're going to have to pay Munchak. And I got no problem with that. The other thing, when it comes to daydreaming, as far as the coaching staff is concerned, and Arthur Smith, is Jim Schwartz is the defensive coordinator. Again, Jim Schwartz and Arthur were together in the, well, I guess actually technically not, because I think Jim Schwartz got hired as the consultant in 2021, and Arthur was already gone to the Falcons. But as we all know, Schwartzy, Titans guy, Arthur, Titans guy. And a lot of the coaches on the staff right now, not to say that, oh my God, you got to keep Callahan's guys, but a lot of the coaches on the staff, whether it's Steve Jackson, whether it's Frank Bush, whether it's Tracy Rocker, they have experience on the coaching staff, both with Munchak and with Jim Schwartz. Remember, Denard Wilson came from Jeff Fisher's group with the Rams, and that, of course, Greg Williams, Jim Schwartz, those kind of guys. So I'm looking at Arthur, and I know Arthur can coach offense. We can all agree on that, right? Like, we all watched it with our own eyes. We watched the Titans absolutely light it up with Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. And so we know he can coach offense. And we saw Ryan Tannehill and how much better Ryan Tannehill was when he went from working with crap ass, Matt LaFleur was it, but crap ass Miami. And we saw Ryan Tannehill with Arthur Smith, and Ryan Tannehill never played better than he played under Arthur Smith. And so we know he can coach the quarterback. We know Jim Schwartz can coach the defense. He's doing it right now in Cleveland. And we know Mike Munchak can coach the offensive line. And usually, there's a little bit of when it comes to a guy wanting to, say, hey, they fired me as the head coach. I don't want to come back. Munchak is saying, no, I'd be willing to come back. The same way Vance Joseph went back to the Denver Broncos, even though they fired him as head coach. Just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind of a potential coaching staff. And if you're Amy and Arthur's sitting there and telling you, hey, Munchak offensive line coach, I'm sure Arthur's got an idea who he wants to be strength coach. Munchak offensive line coach, Schwartz defense. I bet you Amy would get pretty excited. If Amy likes Arthur, and I'm sure she does, if Amy likes Arthur, then they're going to have to fail him in the initial interview, because if he gets to Amy in the second interview, that may win him the job over a guy like Matt Nagy, who everybody really wants. I do want to touch on this when it comes to the news today as I move off of Arthur Smith, because Mike McDaniel got fired in Miami, and boy, I knew, and just so... It's so obvious how some of you people operate, where as soon as he gets fired, Titan fans are like, yes, the dream of Robert Saleh and Mike McDaniel teaming up to save the Titans is alive. Let me say this. I never liked Mike McDaniel. And I always thought Tua was kind of a bum. And I think that kind of independently of each other, but I'm willing to say that maybe Tua just sucked. At the end of the day, maybe that was what it was when it came to Tua, and you can't blame that on Mike McDaniel. I begged them not to sign him to that contract. I kept saying Sam Darnold's better, and I pay Sam Darnold $20 million instead of paying Tua $50, and they paid Tua, and let's not go down that road again, because I was right and everybody else was wrong. But I never was impressed with McDaniel. I watched the Hard Knocks that they did in season when they played the Titans a couple years ago, and I thought, this guy does not impress me whatsoever. It feels like in Miami, they are setting this up to give the job to John Harbaugh, because they've got to the second round of interviews, and one of the guys with the Chargers is apparently John Harbaugh's guy who was with him in Baltimore, that's now with Jim at the Chargers, and he's made it to the second round of interviews. My guess is they're going to try to lure Harbaugh, and they're going to let Harbaugh pick his GM, which I told you yesterday, if you want Harbaugh, you're going to have to let Harbaugh run the operation. I think Stephen Ross, who again got suspended because he was trying to lure Sean Payton in, I think Stephen Ross sees Harbaugh's out there. I think they reached out on the Harbaugh front. I think they're going to want to let Harbaugh hire the general manager so they can get Harbaugh. And today he fired Mike McDaniel because of it. It could be that they're going for Anthony Weaver and they want to keep Anthony Weaver from Baltimore. I don't know, but I think it looks like Harbaugh. Duck theory. If it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, chances are it's probably a duck. The duck theory tells me John Harbaugh is going to the Miami Dolphins. And he'll deal with Tua for a year, and then he'll get rid of him, and he'll go get another quarterback. So I think that for those of you that had a dream of John Harbaugh, which I told you was not going to happen because you'd have to pay him $100 million, the guy in Miami is desperate for this kind of coach. Remember, he got suspended trying to tamper with Sean Payton. He will give him the $100 million, and he will give him full control of the organization, which I don't think Mike Borgonzi would just relinquish to Harbaugh. And if you don't do that, you're not getting Harbaugh. So I feel pretty safe that Harbaugh is going to the Dolphins. Now, I have to ask you people, what is up with this obsession with Robert Saleh and Mike McDaniel? I understand the Miami Dolphins scored a lot of points when Tua played those noon CBS games that were called by Spiro Ditas and Adam Archuleta, and nobody watched them, and they scored all those points. And after they scored all those points, they would then play a game on Sunday Night Football, and they couldn't get a first down. And I understand that I always put that blame on Tua, and so I don't blame Tua's coach. And I understand that McDaniel comes from the Shanahan tree, and the Shanahan tree's got a little secret sauce to it. There's no doubt. But what's up with this Robert Saleh obsession? I'm not somebody who's like, Robert Saleh failed in New York. Everybody fails in New York. That doesn't mean he's a bad coach. But I'm just wondering what makes Robert Saleh so sexy to you guys. Like, again, when guys tell me that they love Cliff Kingsbury, I know it's because you think he looks good and you want his offense out there. You think he and his offense are both sexy. I get it. He never wins anything, but you think he and his offense are just that sexy. And I'm not here to tell you that Robert Saleh isn't a good coach. I don't know. I don't know Robert Saleh from a jar of Vicks. But what is up with this just obsession? I mean, this just Woody in the pants over Robert Saleh and Mike McDaniel. What about those guys is just, I understand if you're a New England Patriot fan this time last year, and it's Mike Vrabel as the head coach, Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. I get that. Because you've seen Josh McDaniels as an offensive coordinator before, and you've seen Mike Vrabel as a head coach. And I'm sure at the time, though I don't remember exactly what people were saying, I'm sure the knock on Vrabel was Todd Downing, Tim Kelly. So, yeah, that would get me excited. But, and like, again, if I'm a Dolphin fan, the idea of Harbaugh and Harbaugh picking his GM, again, I'm a Dolphin fan. I'm not actually a Dolphin fan, but I'm saying if I'm a Dolphin fan, I had to watch Brian Flores, who I think history has been far too kind to. But I had to watch Brian Flores and that debacle and Chad O'Shea. And now I got to watch this, and I had to watch Adam Gase, and I didn't get John Harbaugh. I get it. I understand why you'd be excited about John Harbaugh. Saleh and McDaniel? What's so different about them than any of these other guys? What's so different about those? Again, I don't get it. Like, I understand if I'm sitting here talking about Arthur, Munchak, and Schwartz and saying, hey, I think that can work. And I understand if you're, again, I don't really understand the Chris Shula obsession. I don't know why everybody thinks he's such a great coach. I mean, he's in line to get a coaching job, but I don't understand why it's like, oh my God, he'd be so good. But I mean, Robert Saleh did do some really dumb shit when he was the coach of the Jets. Not to say that means he was bad, but he did some really, really dumb stuff. And I have a hard time getting over that. And I also wonder if maybe Saleh is great at running the defense when Shanahan is running the offense. And Shanahan is picking the players. But man, you people are just obsessed. I've never seen anything like it. Just obsessed with Robert Saleh and Mike McDaniel. And, Daniel says, hard for anyone to succeed with the Jets. Chris says, I'd be willing to give Saleh a shot outside of the Jets shit show. I don't disagree with that. I totally agree that it could just be the Jets. And that's why, when it comes to why it didn't work for Saleh, it could just be the Jets. But I still think he's got a little stank on him. And I just don't understand what makes Robert Saleh such a dream candidate. That I'm not sure I understand. The other candidate that we all know about, that we all talk about, that we all heard about, and again, I don't think Titan fans are in love with this idea, but I think some Titans fans are resigned to this idea. And I think that, again, there's some, I feel like you can argue either side of the table when it comes to this, but that is Matt Nagy. And I've said, as far as the coaching odds are concerned, he's the favorite in the clubhouse. Everybody thinks it. Again, we all think that Mike Borgonzi's going to hire Matt Nagy. And if you remember the other day, he said Matt Nagy did some good things in Chicago and did a lot of good things when he came back to the Chiefs. So what does that mean? Jason Anderson joins us now on the program. Jason Anderson with Sports Radio 810 in Kansas City. So I don't know Matt Nagy from a jar of Vicks. I know that he was the coach in Chicago. I think you can make an argument for him in Chicago. Jason, you can make an argument against him in Chicago. I've heard both sides of the argument. He comes back to Kansas City. He's with Andy Reid. This year, the Chiefs stink. I don't know how much of that's his fault. Floor's yours. When you hear Titan fans talking about Matt Nagy, what do you think of him as a head coach?
I think if you are hiring him as a head coach, you are betting on him learning from whatever mistakes were made in Chicago, and him developing more of his own scheme and not just copying whatever Andy Reid does on offense, because they need an upgrade with an offensive scheme in Kansas City. It's been 3 years running. It's one of the reasons why I don't hold Matt Nagy as a big reason why this offense has struggled the last couple of years, because he's running Andy Reid's offense. Andy Reid calls the plays. I mean, Matt Nagy's the offensive coordinator, but it's in name only. Like, he helps Andy Reid come up with the game plan. But as far as calling the plays on the field and on Sundays or whatever day they're playing, that's Andy Reid. I think the further away we get from his Bears tenure, I think the better it looks, because he took Mitchell Trubisky to the playoffs a couple of times, and he was right about Justin Fields. Like, he wasn't a fan of drafting Justin Fields, and the deal was they're going to draft Justin Fields if he sits the first year. That was the plan until somebody gets hurt, and then week 2 he's in there. And now we know, like, who's winning with Justin Fields. Other coaches have tried it, and they haven't been successful in doing that. So he was losing, but also, a couple of years getting to the playoffs with Mitchell Trubisky, and then at the end, Justin Fields. I think what he has talked about, and there's no doubt he's got a PR campaign going on right now to be a head coach. Dan Pompei at The Athletic wrote about it. Jonathan Jones at CBS Sports wrote about it. They all have these bigger pieces and in-depth looks at Matt Nagy and what happened in Chicago. And he'll tell you, he deviated from who he was, and he started to give in to everybody else because the losing was happening. And instead of being true to what he believed would be the best route, he started trying to make other people happy. Or, okay, well, I'll take this person's advice. Okay, well, I'll take this person's advice. And it seems like that's one of the things he's saying he won't do this go around, unless it's somebody that he respects. Like, it's not just, hey, a player's coming in and saying we should do this. Well, we're losing and I'm losing the locker room. Okay, yeah, let's do this then. It's not going to be that. And I mean, you can make a case for Matt Nagy for what he did in Chicago and a second go around being a head coach, learning from that, because he's already proven he can take a team with a bad quarterback to the playoffs. And I don't know how much different his offense is going to be from Andy Reid's, Jared, because I don't know that if Mike McDaniel was the OC here in Kansas City, which is what everybody wants. By the way, I would love Mike McDaniel to be the OC in Kansas City, because he actually runs the football and he understands what going under center means. And not everything is an RPO. Like, it is so stale and it is predictable. It's been 3 years running, and we see what it looks like without Patrick Mahomes quarterbacking. I mean, the last 4 games Mahomes has not played in, they've got 40 drives and 1 touchdown when he's not in there covering up all the warts.
Do you really think, though, that, I mean, on the Nagy front, like, I see people saying that the Chiefs offense is regressing and people put the blame on Nagy. Do you actually think that that's on Nagy? I mean, they don't have any tackles. They've got, to me, the offense has Mahomes and 2 really good offensive linemen, and Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. And other than that, I think the offense stinks. I think Kelsey is cooked. I don't put the Chiefs offense on Nagy at all this year. Am I right to do that or wrong for that?
I don't, but if in Kansas City, you would be in the minority in that. I mean, look, the offensive coordinator in Kansas City has been, it's been the lightning rod, because if the offense is great, Andy Reid, genius. If the offense is struggling, fire Eric Bieniemy. The offense is great, Andy Reid, a genius. The offense is struggling, fire Matt Nagy. He's the issue. He's the problem. Well, I mean, somehow Andy Reid escapes any criticism when the offense has gone backwards for 3 years in a row. Like, they were the number 1 offense in 2022. They were amazing. And then 2023, 2024, 2025, they're doing the same things they were doing post Tyreek Hill in 2022. Only post Tyreek Hill, they hadn't been doing it for 3 years. They did it for that year. And now they've been doing it over and over again. They don't go under center. They are 32nd in the league in going under center. They are number 3 in the league in RPOs. It's just the same predictable stuff. And what I wonder about Matt Nagy is, if Matt Nagy were truly running the Chiefs offense, let's say Andy Reid was a defensive mind. Andy Reid's Robert Saleh, right? And says, Matt Nagy, it's your offense. Is this what the offense would look like if Matt Nagy was running it? Or is Matt Nagy helping coordinate with Andy Reid's offense who hasn't updated it in a couple of years. And Matt Nagy's ready to get to Tennessee and go, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's what we were doing there, but here's what I'm seeing working around the NFL. We need to go heavier personnel. Let's go under center more. These are the things we didn't do in Kansas City, and I'm ready to get them rolling because this is what I learned from. We have no idea if that's the case with Matt Nagy. If he is the coach in Tennessee, I would hope that's the route he would take. If he's in Tennessee and says, I'm running Andy Reid's system, I'd be concerned about that.
So when it comes to that, a couple of years ago, when everybody around the country was trying to figure out why Eric Bieniemy wasn't getting any real bites for head coaching opportunities, I felt like you and your guys in Kansas City kind of were very skeptical of the national narratives around Bieniemy and kind of thought more like, no, you don't want this guy to be your head coach. Do you feel the same way about Nagy that, hey, you see him behind the scenes, you don't want him to be the head coach? Or do you feel like it's totally different and Matt Nagy actually does have the chops to be a head coach?
I don't know what Eric Bieniemy would look like as a head coach. So I was of two minds in Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy when Eric Bieniemy was in Kansas City. One of them was, I do believe with Eric Bieniemy being the OC as long as he was, that there was a racial element. It's hard to think that Doug Peterson and Matt Nagy, who didn't call plays, would then get jobs, and Eric Bieniemy would be the coordinator of the best offense for a number of years in a row and doesn't get a job. I mean, I think there's an element of, if he was white, I think he would have got a job. The other part of it is he rubs people the wrong way. He's a little in your face. He would have back and forths with Patrick Mahomes on the sideline. It's one of the reasons people, were ready to move on from Eric Bieniemy. It's like, what? Oh, you're going at Patrick Mahomes on the sideline? He and Kelsey are arguing on the sideline, like they're having these blow up yelling matches on the sideline. Apparently this is going on behind the scenes. This is going on in practice. It's just a different personality, that there's a big respect there, but there's also a little bit of back and forth that takes place. So in the interviews, I don't know, what was Eric Bieniemy like when he was being interviewed? Because if it was like some of his press conferences, I can understand why GMs and owners would go, we like the credentials and the offense and everything and the bona fides, but we are going to go with somebody else because we just weren't overly impressed with this particular presentation. Where Matt Nagy's already got a job and he's got the great relationship with Borgonzi, but he also has 3 other interviews lined up. And Eric Bieniemy went from Kansas City being the quote-unquote OC under Andy Reid to being the OC for a year in Washington, to go into college, and now he's a running backs coach in Chicago. Like, if it was Eric Bieniemy wasn't getting a job for whatever reason, I think he'd be more than a running backs coach in the NFL right now. So I think Matt Nagy, whether it's an organizational thing, if it's a plan thing, if it's a interview thing. Some people are good interviewers. Some people suck at being interviewed. Some people are good test takers. Some people are terrible test takers, but they know the curriculum. It's just sort of different personalities. And if you're a bad interviewer, but you could kill it when it comes to the actual, coaching, you may not get that opportunity to do that if you're a bad interviewer. Losing the press, like Nick Sirianni was terrible at his press conference, and he's won a Super Bowl. I mean, Dan Campbell was biting kneecaps, and everybody was making fun of him. Adam Gase couldn't see anything. Now, he sucked. So you never know what you're going to get when it's some of these things. So I'd be skeptical to a degree because of Matt Nagy and the Chiefs offense, but I would also have a little bit more of an optimism if there's a guy that did the blind spot report with Laura Okrent, that he went and said, what's wrong? What are people thinking about me? And I want to hear it because I want to improve. And when you get 40 people that he said are not Matt Nagy fans, 40 people, and she says, let it all out there. What's Matt Nagy as a coach? What's the problem? What do you think of him? Honest assessment, it's anonymous. And then he's got to sit there for 4 or 5 hours and have her tell him everything that's said. That's somebody that's going, what's wrong? What do they think? Because I want to get better, not I got screwed in Chicago.
Jason, one thing I do wonder about on the Nagy front is, let's say I own the Titans. And
can I borrow a few $100?
I would make that happen
Thanks.
Instantly. But let's say I own the Titans and Mike Borgonzi's the general manager. And I mean, obviously, how much respect I have for general managers in the NFL, considering that I worked with one. And I say, okay, hey, you're the GM, and I always believe that the GM should pick the coach and the GM should be in charge of the coach. I know it's not like that everywhere. And if there was a Jim Harbaugh or that kind of coach out there, I could make an adjustment for that. But let's say Mike Borgonzi, for the most part, is in charge, but I own the team. And I said, Jason, Mike is telling me that he knows Matt Nagy is a good coach and that he knows Matt Nagy will be a good coach. You're in Kansas City. You cover the Chiefs every day. I understand your view would be different than that of Borgonzi, who's there with him. Should I do this? Should I hire Matt Nagy to be the coach based off of what you know from covering Matt Nagy, covering the Chiefs, hearing things behind the scenes about what people are saying about him? Should I do it, or should I put my owner veto in there and say, Mike, you got to give me a better candidate?
I would say to you that from what I don't necessarily view a good OC as that guy's going to be a good head coach. I think those are different skill sets. If you are a really good account executive for a few accounts in sales, does that mean you're going to be the best sales manager for the overall floor? Those are different skill sets, working personally with a business or handling the overall team of salespeople. It's different skill sets that are there. So I would say, one, if he's struggling as an OC or you think the OC part of it isn't working, well, then does he call plays or have an actual offensive coordinator and he's going to be the head coach? What I would also offer is, if you're saying, should I trust my GM and his instincts and what he says is going to be a good coach or not? I would say, if you're not going to, then you should fire him and find somebody that you trust to make the right decision.
Do you people in Kansas City, do you guys think that Matt Nagy will be the next head coach of the Titans? Because we in Nashville think Matt Nagy will be the next head coach of the Titans.
That's the general consensus around here, considering people are talking about, Mike McDaniel is the next offensive coordinator. Cliff Kingsbury is open, which I don't want Cliff Kingsbury as.
But you know that's not going to happen. Like, Andy is going to hire Doug Peterson to be the offensive coordinator, or Mike Kafka or whatever.
No, it might be Kafka, but it's going to be Joe Blameyer, who's their passing game coordinator right now. That's who it's going to be. It's going to be quarterback's coach, passing game coordinator, because that's what they did with Matt Nagy was QB's coach, and then he moved up to OC, and then Eric Bieniemy moved up to OC, and then they brought back Matt Nagy, who was, quarterback's coach the year that, Eric Bieniemy was here, and when Nagy got hired, then he moved up to OC. So, yeah, it's Joe Blameyer, who played football at Delaware. Brett Veach and Matt Nagy played football at Delaware. Oh, cool. So it's going to be Joe Blameyer, who's going to be the OC. That's what I expect, when in reality, if they were really serious about getting back to being like the number one offense, I think they would throw a boatload of money at Mike McDaniel, or they'd go get Nathan Shieldhouse from the Los Angeles Rams and bring him in and marry the Andy Reid and Sean McVay offensive scheme to try to get the best of both worlds from that and advance the scheme, and not just bring in the same guys that you've coached over and over, and all they know is your offensive scheme.
I mean, that sounds good, but do coaches ever do that? Like, does an offensive head coach ever bring in another offensive coach that runs a different system than that offensive coach?
Yeah. Andy hasn't brought in a different coach, but I will say, what he has done is, in the middle 2000 teens, when Alex Smith was the quarterback, he did spend an offseason studying the pistol formation. He didn't run pistol, but he spent the offseason studying the pistol formation. And then the Chiefs started running the pistol with Alex Smith. Then he started studying 3-4 years later with Patrick Mahomes. What are these RPOs? Okay, let me institute RPOs with Patrick Mahomes. These quick throws, even with Alex Smith a little bit. What's the next evolution of football? These colleges are doing these RPOs. So he spent an offseason studying RPOs. Well, okay, now you've spent about a decade being a pistol and RPO team. So what's the next iteration? Why are the teams that are successful in the NFL going under center more? Okay, that part of the NFL has evolved and the pendulum is swinging back. Defenses are putting guys deep, and they've got smaller, faster guys to cover more ground. So teams are saying, we're going to run at them. We're going to go under center. We're going to get bigger. The Buffalo Bills drafted a blocking tight end in the 5th round. The 5th round, a blocking tight end, because they looked at it and said, we're committed to running the football because look how defenses have evolved. And Andy Reid went and got a small running back in the 7th round. And it was like, hey, this is going to be a guy that's going to help us out. Well, he's really not. So He's done it twice already in Kansas City where he has added elements of different offenses without bringing in an entire new scheme. It's like, let's add the pistol, let's add the RPOs, and we'll see if he does that this offseason. They fired the wide receivers coach, and I think that's a good first step, mainly because he's got a connection with Andy Reid. He's been around. His dad has a connection with Andy Reid. He's advanced up. It's what Andy has done. You give him a job, you keep advancing, you keep advancing. And he looked at it and said, wide receivers weren't good. We're going to fire the wide receiver coach, which is a change from what they've done because they haven't fired a coach in a long time since he fired Bob Sutton in 2018. The only other coaches they've lost have gone somewhere else to coach.
Were you in Louisville when Peter Sirmon was the defensive coordinator?
What year was that? Oh.
I want to say it was still under Petrino, but I'm not sure.
Yep. Yeah, I was there. I was there at that time.
Okay. So they hired him to be the defensive coordinator, and Todd Grantham gets fired or leaves, and then Peter Sirmon comes in. And I was in the office that day, and I said to Derek Mason, who was doing the midday show, who played with Peter with the Titans, I said, hey, my team just hired Peter Sirmon to be the defensive coordinator. What do you think? And he was like, oh, man, that's good for Peter. And I was kind of hoping to hear like, oh, man, you knew he was going to be a coach. You knew he was going to be. Mm-hmm. So then Floyd comes in, and I said to Floyd, who drafted Peter Sirmon? I said, hey, Louisville just hired Peter Sirmon to be the defensive coordinator. What do you think? And he goes, good for Peter. And again, not like whenever anybody that was around Vrabel would talk about Vrabel, it was like, oh, you knew Vrabel was going to be a coach. And it wasn't, I just, from that, they didn't say he sucked. They didn't say, but it was just, they were very like, okay, yeah, good for Peter. But not like, oh man, Peter, he's so smart. He's so this, he's so that. When it comes to Nagy, if Nagy gets the Titans job, would you say, good for Matt? Or would you say, good for the Titans and good for Borgonzi?
That's a great question. That's a really good question because my first instinct would be good for Matt. Good for him getting another opportunity there to go and show that what happened in Chicago was more of circumstances than inability, or a really good learning experience that the second go around, he can learn from that and become a good coach. That's my first instinct is to say good for Matt Nagy. Now, people in Kansas City will say, oh, Matt Nagy's going to Tennessee, good for the Chiefs. And that's just because he's the guy that the offense isn't good, so they're blaming Matt Nagy, that it's got to be Matt Nagy. The offense is awesome. It's Andy Reid. It's got to be Nagy's fault. And I just don't believe that Nagy is the issue here. There's a comparison I've made on the radio that would mean nothing to the folks in Nashville. But the Royals had their GM Dayton Moore, who they won a World Series with Dayton Moore. But he took over and he did things more of a relationship. We're not going to trade him because I like him. He's a good family man, right? We've got to go this route or that route. And we're just going to keep the guys together and keep doing it because, man, we're really close. And he eventually got fired by the new ownership group and they hired his assistant GM. And around here, it was the same of the old. He's going to do the exact same thing as Dayton Moore, only he hasn't. He's traded guys, even though they're personal relationships. He has gone to arbitration with guys, which Dayton Moore would never go to arbitration because it gets real personal in arbitration. This guy's like, I don't care. We're trying to save money. We're going to arbitration. It's a business. You don't like me? That's fine. Go play ball. We're paying you to play ball. I'll trade you. I'm going to trade this guy. It's a trade that hurts. We don't want to trade that guy, but we got to get better. It was not what Dayton Moore was. And so that's what I wonder about Matt Nagy is when he gets a head coaching job, it's like, oh, great. He's just going to be Andy Reid's system. Maybe. Or maybe he's been waiting to go, no, Andy, we should be doing this. I think we should be, man, if we just, yep, you're right. Okay, let's do the RPO thingy. Let's go and do that. And if he might be looking at going, wait, if I get my another opportunity, this is what I'm going to be doing with this. There's that opportunity. I think that would be great for the Titans if that was the case.
Last one for you, Jason. You brought up the Dan Pompei story in The Athletic. I read that and I thought that was borderline Matt Nagy propaganda, and I'm fine with that. Yeah. But somebody in the Titans press corps said to me, and this really mattered. Dan Pompei is not some, Joe Schmo blogger.com. I mean, he is a big time Hall of Fame voter, and they said, yes, it was a Nagy redemption piece, a Nagy puff piece. But the fact that Dan Pompei felt like writing that is basically an experienced guy who has a lot of skins on the wall covering the NFL saying, give this guy a second chance. What do you buy? What do you make of that? Do you think that there's something there that if Dan Pompei is willing to go to the lengths that he was going in that story for Matt Nagy, that at least is a big positive for you because of what you think of Dan Pompei?
I would say if I'm Dan Pompei and Matt Nagy's people reach out to me and say, we want you to hang out with Matt Nagy for a few days and write the profile on him, what he learned, what he did in Chicago. You can reach out to people in Chicago and you get to profile a coach that failed at one spot, but thinks he's good enough for another spot and isn't blaming the previous place, but is trying to learn from that and is a popular name. And he's worked with Andy Reid and he's got a couple of Super Bowls. Are you interested in that, Dan Pompei? I would say almost any columnist or writer across the country would go, yeah, I'd love that access. I'd love to do that. And who are some guys I should reach out to in Chicago, Matt? Okay, well, here's this guy that Allen Robinson. We butted heads. We had some issues. Reach out to him, see what he says. And whatever he says, because I'm willing to put it all out there because I know what I did in Chicago, there were mistakes made by me. I know that I was not a perfect coach that got screwed over in some, situation that was out of my control and everybody blamed me. No, I made mistakes. And if you want to talk to them about those mistakes, that's great. I spent 4 hours talking to, people about, the blind spot of them telling me everything that's wrong with me. I'm ready to do that. I think any writer out there would go, yeah, I will take that access. I don't know that I make heads or tails one way or another, that if Dan Pompei is willing to write that, it means that, okay, he's a true believer in Matt Nagy. He may have come away from that going, okay, I see a guy that's not walking around mad at the world, but walking around saying, how can I be a head coach that wins a Super Bowl? Which is a different view than maybe some other guys that have gotten fired before.
I will say this. I have never met a head coach who has been fired that sat there and said, here's what I did wrong. It's always, we were 4-3 and the running back broke his foot and then the owner got mad and they traded away the right guard.
I wanted to do this.
Never my
he
fault.
Didn't listen to me. I was right about this move. He didn't draft my guy. Look at that guy now. That's the guy I wanted and he's amazing. And I was stuck with this guy. Not my fault. Yeah.
I met one general manager and I'll tell you who it was. Because I think he'd be okay with this. Mark Dominic, the old general manager in Tampa Bay, is the one guy, who basically told me, here's where I think I fucked up when I was general manager, and here's where I think I could have done better. And I heard that, and that made me think like, hey, Mark Dominic, I would be willing to give him a second shot because I know he's smart and because he's willing to look at himself in the mirror and say, hey, here's where I screwed up. And not a lot of those coaches are able to do that. Jason Anderson, Sports Radio 810 Kansas City, as always. Jason, I really do appreciate your time. And I was kind of hoping for like a yes or a no on Nagy, and you kind of gave me a we'll see on Nagy. Which
it's a no if he goes there and runs the same system they're running right now. It's a yes if he gets there and says, okay, let me spread my wings a little bit and introduce some other things.
They think that Cam Ward is the next Mahomes around here.
Well, yeah. I mean, so is Caleb Williams. Have you seen Trinidad?
Yeah, but Caleb
Chambliss?
Williams actually has, Yeah,
but Chambliss ran all the way back to his own goal line and then threw a pass against Georgia. I mean, that's as close to Mahomes as I have seen. I mean, it's Mahomes-esque. I think everybody that makes plays off platform should be the next Mahomes.
That is how they do it. Jason, great stuff, man. Take care of yourself.
About it.
Yep. Jason Anderson joining us on the program, Sports Radio 810 in Kansas City. And, it was funny. If I wasn't at the beach and I wasn't going back out to the beach, the one thing I would say is that, I kind of wondered, hey, we're talking about all these guys. Jason was the program director in Louisville when I was in Louisville. I'd be like, if somebody called you and said, what about Jared Stillman for head radio host, like a head coach, what would you say? And what would I say if somebody called me? But I saw you guys in the chat talking about Jason sounds like a good dude. He's a great dude. He's a great dude. And let me say this about him. That guy, when it comes to doing a radio show, I have never seen a guy who works so hard and who is so prepared that I almost think when I was in Louisville, I thought it was to his detriment that he worked so hard and spent so much time on, and a lot of people loved him there. His style is different than my style, but I thought it was almost to his detriment at times because it was so detailed and so good that it's like, sometimes people just want to be in the car and hear, this guy sucks. Sometimes they just want to hear that, and that's not his game. That's my game. But that guy, he knows his shit, and he always has. And so I was glad when I reading you guys in the chat saying that you liked listening to Jason. Okay. I want to get to the media beef that apparently yesterday was all over Twitter. I heard Paul Kuharsky on my former station basically say, I don't have it pinned down, but Mike McCarthy doesn't like Chad Brinker. That's not exactly what Paul said. And again, Paul said, he wasn't for sure about that. But what I heard in the car was I heard Paul Kuharsky basically say that Mike McCarthy doesn't like Chad Brinker. Whether or not Paul can totally pin it down or not, that's what I heard. Then all of a sudden I see on Twitter that Paul and Tic Tac Titan are just going right at each other. And it's just, you're a bozo blogger in your grandma's basement with the potato chips all over your face. And the other one's like, we content creators are taking over the world. Fuck you guys, the traditional media. And it started this whole kind of thing. And can I enter the conversation? Can I? If I may? If it's okay with you guys? Let me say this. And I say this as somebody who was in traditional media for 10 years. And then because we couldn't come to an agreement on a new contract, was out of traditional media, although still doing radio on Sirius XM, but was out of traditional media and was looking at my options of, hey, if I want to still talk Titans, what do I do? And it was, let's do this show. And Braden wanted me on board, and Braden was kind of telling me the differences. And what I have learned in the last 5 or 6 months is just how different the digital space is than the radio. And I also know the similarities between the two. Digital space is more about just content and quality and, here's the take, and now here's a tiny little video, and let's cut it into a YouTube short, and let's get 10,000 people to watch it, and then let's put this on TikTok, and then that's just, it's different than radio, where radio is go fill 4 hours every day. But then it's the same because, again, it's about capturing the attention spans. I think what happens in the media, and I think yesterday was a good example of this. People in the media are far, far, far too insecure. And I think it's because deep down inside, we all know we're replaceable one way or another. And content creation through phones, through computers, through podcasting, through YouTube, through whatever, was trending in that direction. And then it hit warp speed when COVID happened. And it's a different era. Like, it's a different era than it used to be. When I talk to people who are 70 years old or 65 years old, some of them, not all, but some, are like, oh man, I miss listening to you on the radio. In fact, I talked to a former NFL coach today who was like, I can't listen to you. And I'm like, yes, you can. But for everybody under the age of 65, it hasn't been very difficult for them to find the new show. I think what happens is we're all, to a certain extent, really insecure about our identities, because this is who we are. Like, this is what I do. And I know I'm a dad now, and I know, but this is who I am. This is who Paul is. This is what Paul's done his entire life. This is what he's, and I see both sides of the argument. Here's what I'm going to say on the state of Titans media. I think that I wish there was a little bit more in-depth reporting in terms of the gossip. And I know you're going to say, of course, you want more gossip, but like when Rand and Vrabel hated each other, they didn't really put that out. And there was, the one thing that Jason Fitz came on my show and said that everybody was like, oh, wow. He said that the coaches were mad that Rand probably leaked it to Ian Rappaport. But then immediately they shot that down and said, no, we're buddies. And I'm like, that wasn't the case, but there weren't stories about it. And that's where I look at the bigger cities like the Bostons and the Chicagos, and they have that kind of stuff. I also think it's kind of disingenuous and Tic Tac Titan can do whatever he wants. And he is very successful at what he does, by the way. Like, I have a pretty good idea how much money he's making from that. He's making money now. But I have a problem when he's doing training camp reactions and he's not going to training camp. It's like, Alec Manor had 2 touchdowns today at camp. Let's break it down. And I'm like, but you didn't see it. It's not like it was on TV. It wasn't. I don't, whatever. I think in this case, we kind of all need each other. And what I mean by that is Tic Tac Titan lives off in Ohio and just reacts to whatever comes out. He needs Kuharsky because Kuharsky's the one who talked to Mike Munchak. And Mike Munchak says he'd be interested in returning to the Titans as the offensive line coach. Tic Tac Titan ain't coming out with that. That's never going to happen. You know, I have looked at Paul for the last couple of years as kind of the direct line to Chad Brinker. And I've called Paul out for that. But at some point, I do want to know behind the scenes what Chad Brinker's thinking. Paul was the one who went to the combine, came back and said, they ain't going to sign Sam Darnold. They ain't going to sign Aaron Rodgers. They ain't going to go and put these guys in there. And they're not going to. And like, we need that. Like, we need that. We need that kind of reporting. And Jim Wyatt used to be the greatest reporter that there ever was. He was a total bulldog, and now he works for the Titans. So he's not going to throw the same fastball that he used to throw at the Tennessee. And that's not a knock on Jim, but I think Jim was working his ass so hard that it's like, I can go to the Titans, I can make more money. Newspapers are kind of on their way out. I can go to the Titans, make more money, and just enjoy life. And I'm happy for Jim. I think I saw somebody say yesterday that they think that it's the Twitter algorithm that is why people are so mad, and fans and content creators and media people and everybody's so mad. It's because Twitter wants us to all hate each other and everything else. And let me say this. I think the reason everybody's mad is because the team fucking stinks, and they have fucking stunk for a while. And so, I mean, look, I know my lane. Like, I know my lane. My lane is opinions, and I talk to some people in the league, and I know I could do a 4-hour radio show and be really good at it. I think I'm doing a good job with the podcast. I hope. You know, you had talked to Braden about that. I hope. And I'm really good at kind of sensing out bullshit and taking press conferences and things like that. And then I'm pretty good when it comes to holding people's asses accountable. I feel like I do that. I was there the other day at the press conference, and while everybody was asking around Matt Nagy, I actually asked about Matt Nagy. But I'm not one to tell you that there shouldn't be some beef. I got no problem with that. You know, I said this the other day on the show, 3HL, when my contract, when we didn't work out a new contract, they came up in him with a fastball. They could do that, and it didn't upset me. I mean, I talked my shit at times. They're talking their shit. That's fine. But I just think that maybe if we weren't all so insecure because these were our identities, and we just said, dude, we're just talking about fucking sports. Who cares? Like, who gives a shit that Tic Tac Titan is in Ohio? Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit that Paul said X, Y, Z? Who cares? If we did that and we realized that we were just talking about sports and we weren't, curing cancer over here, then I think people would just kind of let it roll off their back and just kind of laugh and just be like, okay, Kuharsky. See, here's the thing that's crazy. I like Paul. I definitely think Paul hates me, but I also think he kind of likes me. Like, I think Paul is the kind of guy who's like, I never listen to Jared Stillman, and he listens every day because he always knows what I said. So it's hard for me to believe that Paul doesn't know what I say and doesn't listen. And then he'll send me texts when I was on the radio. He would text me and be like, I shouldn't have listened for 5 minutes. I should have. Okay. But I think that's, like a little jealousy thing. And not that Paul sits at home and it's like, I wish I was Jared Stillman, but I think Paul likes being the sheriff in town. And likes, hey, I'm the one who gets to have an opinion. I don't want anybody else giving any attention to anybody else. But I think that's, again, that's the insecurity of we're all replaceable. We're all replaceable. And if I wasn't doing a show, you'd go find something else to entertain. That's what this is. I wanted to get into my, I wanted to just comment on the media beef. And I don't know who makes the most money and who doesn't and who, I don't know that stuff. And I don't think it matters. And again, we can all one day have the number one show, and then the next day bosses are like, oh, well, we can't afford to pay you. And that happens to everybody. So that was me, but that happens to everybody. And I mean, look, this is the way I see it. I think it, I feel it, I say it, that's it. And if people get mad about my opinion, that's fine. Easton Freeze, I actually like Easton. And, we joke on each other, whatever. I get more respect from Easton because when I crap on something he doesn't take it personally. And I think that's how it should be. I am kind of just looking through the, this one I want to get to. Tyler is a real Titans fan. I'm guessing that's Tic Tac Titan. Jared just blabbers to hear himself look at the rabbit hole he went down right now. First of all, I put it out on Twitter today. My son is at preschool right now with a Titans sweatshirt on. So don't be sitting there telling me that I'm not a Titan fan now. Well, I did want to congratulate Vandy basketball. I did actually want to talk about Vandy basketball and the game they had because I did watch the Alabama game last night. Vandy's good. They're good. They're good. Like, they may go to the Final Four this year. They're really good. And their coach, Mark Byington, really, really good as well. Okay, I'm back to the beach and the pool. I will see you guys. I probably not going to do a show tomorrow. We'll figure it out. If there's news that happens, we'll definitely do it. Until then, Stillman & Company, like and subscribe. Tell all your friends. We will keep you updated on the coaching search. And again, I'm pulling for Arthur Smith, but expecting Matt Nagy. Have a great one, everybody.